What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Matt, Pig and Matt here. Back at you with yet another deck profile of a deck I decided to spend the week or so testing and give you guys kind of a semi-budgeted base build of a deck I have profiled before, but I think I've gotten a little better with now, Shaddolls. So let's show you the deck profile, and then afterwards I'll explain a little bit. Alright, so here's the build for you. Started out with the monsters. You're playing 3 copies of Shaddoll Squamata, 2 copies of Wendy, 2 Shadow the Edgelords, 2 Ariels, 1 Dragon, 1 Falco, and 1 Beast. Next, I personally decided to try out the Trick Clown engine of 1 Damage Jungler and 1 Trick Clown. For hand traps, 3 Ash Blossom, 2 Nibiru, and the Gamma package with the brick. That's it for the monsters. Now onto the spells. A Reborn and 1 Foolish Burial. 3 copies of Super Polymerization, 3 copies of El Shaddoll Fusion, and 2 copies of regular Shaddoll Fusion. Now for traps, 1 Core, 1 Schism, 1 Rush Shaddoll Incarnation, 2 copies of Sinister Shadow Games, and the 2 copies of Paleozoic Dynamiscus. That's the main deck. Even 40 cards. Now on the extra deck, 1 copy of Gravity Controller, 1 Proxy F Magician, 1 Cross Sheep, 1 Verte Anaconda, 1 Apollosa the Bow Goddess, 1 Boral Sword Dragon for all of your links. And then for your fusions, the 1 Starving Venom Dragon, 2 copies of El Shaddoll Windy, 1 Shecky Baby, 3 copies of your Best Girl Construct, and 2 App Colognes. Now for kind of a quick thrown together side deck, I just sided 3 Lancia, the 2nd Dragon, and the 3rd Shaddoll Fusion, as well as Regeki, 3 Cyclone, 1 Feather Duster, 2 Needle Ceilings, and 3 Evenly Matches. Now on to some explanations and what have you. Alright folks, so for the most part, Shaddolls, in a nutshell, are an incredibly explosive control deck that have a host of monsters that don't care how they get sent to the graveyard. They just constantly generate you advantage that helps maintain a longer game state. And especially in a surprisingly slower format, this deck absolutely kills. All the monsters in it kind of serve dual purposes, and a lot of the spell and traps cards are really, really good for the most part. And also they have this absolutely fantastic stun card in the form of Winda, who just can straight up win you games on your own, because most decks need more than 1 summon to completely out her. And there's also the added benefit of the fact that App Cologne and Construct don't care how they're sent to the graveyard in order to, like, add one of these Shaddoll spell or traps. Which is why a card like Schism has gained the price tag it has, because in and of itself, it's an incredibly splashable card that gets you an absolutely insane floodgate. The build I showed you is about as bog standard. You know, I want to learn how to play this deck so that it uses the most amount of cards and about the right amount of quantities that I think will give you an idea of how it works, and from there you can do things your own. If you can't afford certain cards like Anaconda, or Schism, you could easily replace the Schism with more trap cards, like the Paleozoic Deinonymiscus, which the reason you play that is because, one, it's a main deck out to Mystic Mine, and two, it doesn't send the card from your hand as cost, so it'll trigger all of your Shaddoll effects, because they're graveyard, or they're sent from hand or field or whatever to graveyard effects are all dependent on them not being discarded for cost. It's kind of like Dark Worlds in a way, if that makes any sense. Now, as for a card like Verte Anaconda, again, this is another really expensive card that, while I think it's necessary because you can make use of the long-forgotten first effect to turn any monster on their field dark and then immediately super poly away any problems, like, it's not completely necessary. If you don't own one, you could easily find replacements. Like, if Bird Up is real popular, you could play this crappy Wind one. You could do this card, which is essentially this, but a Shaddoll card. And it can revive itself from graveyard, so it's super good. Or because you're playing the Gammas, you can easily play the Psy-Frame, or... Hey, this card's pretty good too, I'm just saying. So yeah, there's some flexibility there in regards to whether or not you can afford these cards. But for the most part, out of all the cards I showed off, the absolute you have to run no matter what would be the quantities I showed you for these cards. I mean, you could theoretically run 3 windows if you wanted to, and you could cut App Cologne to 1, but I really wouldn't do so. And Construct has to be 3. This card is so good that I literally chose the most recursive, generic light monsters just to be able to abuse it even more and get to it faster. It's that great. And the other necessary card to play is this, Gravity Controller. Because when you summon your Shaddoll guys to the main monster zone, if the rest of your hand isn't that great, you can kind of turn them into this to at least recoup and get a more advantageous thing. Popular play is you could just Construct, send your Schism, make a Gravity Controller, and then from there you can set your Schism and you have control. Cross Sheep here is just an extension, an enabler, and it helps you chain block effects that matter because you can special summon your fusions to this link marker and then use that to make it where your opponent can't really respond to the effect that matters. And this is absolutely mandatory because I kid you not, probably something like 75-80% of my games I win just because I borrow Sword OTK. This deck does it like crazy, and it's awesome. So 1,010% say out of all of the extra deck cards you absolutely need to play, aside from the recommended fusions that are why the deck runs, 1,000% suggest that you play this card. Last thing to note, I didn't max out on this card because Super Poly is a little bit more versatile, and this one's kind of dependent on the matchups per se. We're kind of at a point where there might be a lot of decks that don't really play too many extra deck monsters. I'm just looking at Eldlik, to be real honest with you. And this card doesn't really shine against that deck too much, unless they're playing some super sacky thing, but 99% of the time they are. It's probably a Dragoon Turbo, which Super Poly completely outs because Starving Venom is just 2 dark monsters. So, yeah. Basically, this card is just absolutely great and somewhat of a linchpin, but not as good as, Super Polymerization, at least right now. So yeah. And that's kind of the quick and dirty of Shaddolls. I think anyone looking to get better at this game should legitimately build this deck because it will kind of teach you all the mechanics of this game. Because all these cards create chain links and can be activated during multiple steps of the game and kind of help inform you of how to better, arrange and control the situation. Really, it's kind of a build it and give it a shot. And trust me, you'll figure it out. And when you figure it out, it's incredibly fun to play. So yeah. quick outro now. There you go. Shaddolls. Courtesy of Matt. You know the drill. Like, comment, favorite, subscribe, all that fine stuff. And this is Meh, Pig and Meh, signing out.